Greetings, fellow treasure hunters. Jacob Weil here,
And Tiki too.
and welcome to Discovering DuckTales. In anticipation of the upcoming reboot, we here at So You Want to Be Imagineer are dusting off the original series in this brand new vlog. It's not ponytails or cottontails. No, it's DuckTales.
Oh woohoo!
Woohoo! And tonight, we have Magica Shadow War.
Yeah, that's right, Jacob. That's right. Talking about the sophomore appearance of the great, the wonderful June Foray as Magica DeSpell, episode 11 of season 1. We're getting up there, Jacob. I think at this point, it's like we've crossed the 10% mark. We're well on our way to being 20% of the way through the show. I don't know. I'm feeling good about our track record so far. I'm feeling good about it.
Yep. I think especially with those upcoming arcs, that'll definitely clear up some space.
Oh yeah, big time. All right, so Jacob, any kind of overall thoughts about this episode before we dive into the nitty gritty of it?
For Magica's second appearance, it actually is quite interesting, and I like the use of perspective for the shadow.
Yeah, the shadow animation itself, I definitely think is the. Let's just kind of use that as a jumping off point here. I definitely think that's one of the best elements of the episode is just kind of the creative uses of like how the shadow like tries to move about the house and avoid light and travel through like kind of absorb itself into other shadows and then also travel through electricity, Jacob. I mean, that's pretty cool, right?
Yep. It's a
uh
magic shadow. It's a magic shadow, so who?
of course. This episode was directed by David Block, who also directed Where No Duck Has Gone Before and Sphinx for the Memories. Jacob, out of the three David Block episodes that we've gotten so far, I'd say this is probably the best out of the three.
Yep, kind of hard to go wrong with characters like this.
Well, that's true. That's the thing. Yeah, with Magica, it's definitely I mean, she just brings such a force to the show. I still think, in spite of I like Glomgold a lot, I still think Magica DeSpell is probably like if I had to pick a definitive villain for DuckTales, it's hard to go wrong with either one of them, but I think Magica DeSpell wins by like a hair. I don't know. Maybe we'll get challenged, but when we see some of the really good Glomgold episodes coming up, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, as of now, I'm still loving Magica for sure.
We'll also have to keep track of like who's the best one-off villain.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's see. From what I'd say Armstrong so far, right? It's
Yeah,
got to be Armstrong.
Armstrong or yep, definitely Armstrong.
I mean, unless you want to count
Oh,
El Capitan, but El Capitan is, he's more of an arc villain.
yeah, he was in like multiple episodes.
Right,
He's
right.
not recurring
Yes.
one. He did
So
technically
right,
appear in more than one.
uh-huh. So right now, I definitely say that Armstrong is probably the standalone episode villain to beat. Definitely not Sarkis.
Yeah.
Sarkis, more like Suckus. Oh God. Okay, but let's see. Yeah, so Jacob, another thing interesting going on in this episode, kind of brings a little bit of continuity together. Magica is still after Scrooge's dime, of course. That's going to be a running thing throughout pretty much all of Magica's episodes. We'll see how repetitive that gets as it goes along, or if they can continue to find creative ways to go about it. Let's see.
The funny thing I noticed is like this was made back when instant print cameras were a new thing.
Oh yeah.
I was like, wow, that's so creative. Like that's so advanced. Like
It's funny because I have like my grandparents have one of those, and now like I can't imagine showing that to like a 7-year-old kid without them thinking it's a legitimate antique. You know what I mean?
the show was made when those things were new, though.
Oh dear. Oh dear. That's another thing I want to kind of talk about with this episode, Jacob. I'm glad you brought up. I think this episode, like, as good as the Magica stuff is, some of the stuff with the nephews, which, again, kind of a reoccurring issue with the show. It's, it's one of the things we're kind of examining with the show. The show isn't perfect. I think we like the Scrooge McDuck and villain and Launchpad McQuack stuff a lot more than we like the stuff with the nephews being wacky kids, man. And I think that's on display here as well, Jacob. I was kind of annoyed by all the candid camera stuff going on. It's like, it was also kind of predictable too. I don't know. It's predictable to me, at least, that it's like, oh, they're running around using this flash camera, and then there's shadows going on. Eventually, the flash camera is gonna be used to defeat the villain. And I was right. So I don't know. That was a little bit of a sticking point for me in the episode. That didn't really work too well, Jacob, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I thought it worked well, though.
Well, there's also kind of the nagging thing of like, it's an obvious pop culture reference of like, hey, you remember Smile, you're on candid camera? That was a thing in the 80s, right?
That's a little before my time.
Well, it was definitely a thing in the 80s. So I don't know. Like, it's not the worst plot device I've ever seen. It's just kind of, I don't know. The nephews, man. The nephews are, I'm going to have to see some effort put into their characters, which I don't think we're going to get. And like I said, I can praise other elements of the show just fine. I love Scrooge as a character. I love most of the villains. I love Scrooge's dynamic with Launchpad. All of that is good stuff. The nephews are kind of like, I mean, they're not at their worst this episode, but they certainly don't really contribute a lot besides the Deus Ex camera that we get at the end.
You see your point, though.
All
This really doesn't really bother me that much.
It's fine. It doesn't bother me too much either. I'm just kind of nitpicking around the thing. I also like the idea that Gyro is giving them inventions that they can use as toys.
This just hope he doesn't give them any robots.
Well, you know what's funny about that, Jacob, is that I just feel like I love the way they are characterizing Gyro so far in the course of the series, because it's very consistent. It's incredibly consistent, really, because Gyro is a guy who, he's a genius. He comes up with these really, really cool inventions, really novel inventions, but he's just an idiot when it comes to the practicality of what to do with those inventions. It's like, oh, Armstrong was just way too, okay, of course it got to the whole, oh, you said to build a real spaceship. And, just Armstrong, of course, like just having a mind of its own. I don't even necessarily think Armstrong was really Gyro's fault, to tell you the truth. But the stuff in Robot Robbers certainly was just kind of working for Glomgold, and then it falling into the wrong hands and everything. So Gyro, well-intentioned, and in this case it definitely paid off because Huey, Dewey, and Louie use his inventions to save the day. But Dragon, at the same time, I have to kind of take a pause and think like, okay, so Gyro is sending out these like heavy-duty prototypes that do God knows what to these kids who could do God knows what with these prototypes. Do you see kind of the questionable, do you see what's questionable about this? But it kind of makes me love Gyro all the more for it, in all honesty.
I do see. Yeah, it's true.
All right. So I like how Gyro isn't in the episode, but we still kind of get some character development on him. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, and it's on the whole scale of his inventions, at least this one didn't try to destroy anything.
Of course. Yeah, his invention actually, like I said, turned out to save the day. Hooray. So,
anyways. He wasn't even there to see it.
Aww. Okay, let's see. I mean, honestly, there's not a ton to talk about with this episode. It's like the what do you think of the Shadow as a villain and kind of how Magica had to actually let's talk about that a little bit, Jacob, because I feel like that's an interesting bit of continuity right there. Is last episode we had Glomgold teaming up with Scrooge, like a reluctant partnership. This episode is an even more reluctant partnership between Scrooge and Magica.
Especially considering what's at stake, his number one dime.
Of course. And it's
if only Glomgold knew about his dime.
And it's like Scrooge and the nephews don't for a second believe that Magica, even when she has the dime, is going to give it back. It's like, I love how spot on they are with that. They already have contingency plans in place.
I mean, think about it. Why would they? Why would they think that she'd give it back? This is a person who's probably tried countless times and probably tried to kill them in numerous ways to get the dime. Do you think she'd give it back just so easily because she made
Oh
made
yeah.
a deal with Scrooge?
Also, this is just kind of me being a nerdy animation fan. I have no idea if this even means anything. It's probably just a coincidence, but I love the fact that Magica gets scared by a moose. Because it's June Foray getting scared by a moose.
Her shadow getting scared by a shadow moose that looks like Bullwinkle.
I was scared by the moose and the squirrel. I don't know. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I like to think that the moose is a beloved reference to Bullwinkle, but I kind of doubt it.
The shadow kind of does look like Bullwinkle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And even the bus kind of looks like, in a horrifying way, kind of like, well, if Bullwinkle did meet a tragic end and became a head trophy, that might be what he looks like. Oh, poor Bullwinkle. So that's what happened after the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie. Okay.
That begs the question, though, why does Scrooge have a taxidermy moose?
I don't know. Maybe it's like something to do with like Disney being rivals with Rocky and Bullwinkle, who are owned by Universal Studios. So Scrooge just straight up sent a mafia hit on Bullwinkle's head, and now he keeps it as a trophy. And him and Mickey just play poker. Oh God, this is just getting way too twisted. I'm sorry. Wow.
Let's just stop before it gets worse.
I know, right? I'm just like, okay, so yeah, severed head of Bullwinkle, Mickey and Scrooge playing poker. Okay, that's a good ending point for that story.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Dear God.
But go back to the shadow. I do like the use of it as a villain. Especially when it like overpowered Magica herself.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it's not like deep or complex or anything like that. It's not like, oh, let's get into the psychological intricacies of being a shadow and what that would mean for one's soul and everything like that. But it does kind of explore some of that stuff very, very lightly. You know what I mean? It's like the shadow's like, this whole time I've been in your shadow, and now it's time for you to be in my shadow. It's my turn to rule over things. So, like I say, it is very kind of like Saturday morning villain-esque, but there's nothing wrong with that. This is a Saturday morning cartoon, But it is interesting that it's essentially like the shadow is literally kind of like the doppelganger of Magica, and it's even more maniacal than Magica is, So, like I said, it's a good kind of I feel like this episode is a good, interesting exploration of Magica and her dynamic with Scrooge, much like the same way that last episode was in regards to Glomgold.
Mm-hmm. Plus it gets kind of freaky looking.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about that's kind of weird. Like you talk about these deep these complexities and how it works. I'm like, yeah, and it's freaky looking too.
Well, yeah, that's very much, I think, what the animators and the showrunners were trying to do, more so than the psychology and the complexity, Jacob. It's so deep, man. No, I think at the end of the day, they were just kind of trying to make a freaky looking cartoon, and I think they achieved it. So,
this is a shadow that you're okay to be scared of.
Oh yeah. Okay, let's see.
At least for this show, it's freaky.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Launchpad doesn't really have a lot to do in this episode. He's kind of just hanging around, helping out,
just doing whatever.
Yeah, just doing stuff. Just whatever you need from me, Mr. McD. I'm just here to operate the lights. I don't know.
Basically, just needed somebody there to help them. I guess no other real reason to be part of this episode.
And then I like how Webby shows up at the very end with Mrs. Beakley, and yet she has no line of dialogue at all. It's like another stand-in role where she's barely even in the episode. which is a-okay in my book. I like that is not a complaint. That is not a knock against the episode. Okay. So let's see, Jacob. Let's see. Anything we're missing out? Anything we haven't talked about yet?
I think that pretty much covers anything. I mean, there's not a lot much more we can talk about like we did with the last episode. I mean, I can't really think of anything to mention.
Really quick, I love the fruit gag at the airport where they're, where the guy's inspecting, like, and there's all these like nefarious, like, like worms and rat tails and everything like that, but no fruit. All right, so, everything's in order. Carry on.
Basically, something can be used as poison and.
Right. Like that was a funny gag.
Like, but no fruit.
Let's see. I'm just trying to think if we're skipping out on any gags like that we could mention. Like we said, I like the creative use of like the shadow going through the electricity and everything. That was a fun part of the episode, how the shadow kind of moved around.
The use of the perspective of shadows.
Right.
How could it wholly interact with shadows and electricity for some reason?
And I definitely think, like I said, out of the 3 episodes directed by David Block so far, I'd say this is the best one. So I don't think he's in Zaslav territory just yet. I think Zaslav is definitely going to be kind of the strong foundation for the show going forward, at least based on his reputation so far. But we'll see. It's interesting. And then this episode is also written by Richard Merwin, who hasn't written anything before this, but he'll be writing a bunch of episodes in the future, so kind of we'll track him as it goes along. Okay, Dragon. So next episode is Master of the Djinni. I hope I'm saying that right. Djinni?
I think it's pronounced Genie.
Genie.
No idea though.
Oh God. Okay, so so that episode is an Alan Zaslav special directed by Alan Zaslav, and also introducing 2 new writers that we haven't seen so far. So, we'll see how it goes. It's Sam Joseph and Monet Beth Rosen. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. All right, Dragon. Sorry. All right, Jacob. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Jacob, go ahead and take us out, my friend.
Well, tonight's adventure has come to an end, but be sure to join us next time on Discovering DuckTales.
Ooh.